Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
It's getting to the point now where there's certain stories that if they have keywords in them, they'll get sent to me. And some of them are quite obvious, and some of them are funny. And several people sent me the story this past week, including Mark, that had the word sword in the headline, sword. And I've got 3 swords on the set. And so now whenever a sword pops up in the news, people hit me with the story. So Mark, thank you very much. MSN reports that the police in New Hampshire have reported that a man chased his neighbor with a sword after being asked to turn down the music. Could you turn it down a bit? No. I do not advise that you react that way to someone who asks you to turn down the music. Manchester, New Hampshire, CBS News originated the story. A New Hampshire man apparently did not take kindly to a neighbor's request for him to turn down his music. Manchester police said a 47-year-old grabbed a sword and chased a man who knocked on his door Monday evening. Police responded to Elm Street about 5:15 for a report of the sword threat. And it makes you wonder if they've got one of those 10 codes for swords. We've got a 1073. What's a 1073? A sword? They say the man chased his neighbor with a 2.5-foot sword, but he got away and there were no injuries. Officers arrested the man and charged him with criminal threatening. He was due to be arraigned in Hillsborough Superior Court sometime Tuesday afternoon. Couple things I got to tell you about right there. If the sword's 2.5 feet long, it's roughly the same size as this. And I'm sure many of you know that one of the rules of thumb with respect to calculating something is your height is also generally the same as your wingspan, tip to tip. So if I'm 6 feet tall, which I am, that means that from here to the end of my fingertips would be 3 feet. 3 feet 1. So that's very, very close. So this right here, my friends, it's a tad over 3 feet from here to here. So the man's sword was actually smaller than this, if in fact it was only 2.5 feet. But we won't make fun of the size of his sword. Instead, we're going to talk about what happens if you threaten somebody, because the man was charged with criminal threatening. And what we're generally talking about here, more commonly known as assault and battery. Assault and battery. And the term assault and battery is going to be heard in all 50 states, but different definitions. But generally speaking, it's something that came over with the common law from where we came from. It's been around since before we were a country. And so some states will have codified it and actually spelled out in a code or a statute, here is what this is, and it is against the law. Other states might simply say assault and battery is illegal. Here's what happens if you do it. So the two terms, assault and battery, two different terms, and then assault and battery as a single term, okay? And you'll kind of see how one flows into the other. In most states, an assault and battery is committed when one person tries to or does physically strike another or acts in a threatening manner to put another in fear of immediate harm. Many states have a separate category for aggravated assault and battery when severe injury or the use of a deadly weapon is involved. Assaults and batteries can also be pursued via civil lawsuits. And I'm going to get this from FindLaw, because I was looking for a good plain English explanation and description that people can understand without having me break out the Black's Law Dictionary, which I do now have. So basically, an assault is an attempted or threat of an injury to another person, while battery is the actual completed act or the act of making contact with another person in a harmful or offensive fashion. And I've actually heard it phrased as an offensive touching. Theoretically, if you walk up to somebody and poke them, that's a battery. Now, the question is whether it rises to a level where that's a crime or whether you've been harmed if someone did that to you. But technically speaking, that's how it's defined. Now, we can talk more definite definitions specifically. The definition for assault varies from state to state, but it's often defined as an attempt to injure someone else, and in some circumstances can include threats or threatening behavior. Generally speaking, though, it's a threat that's coupled with the potential to do harm. So if I say I'm going to hurt you and I pull out a sword, you can believe that it's possible I could hurt you. So that would be an assault. Now, if I yell at you across a lake and say, "Hey, I'm gonna hit you in the fist right now," I can't. The lake is in the middle, so that might not be considered an assault because it depends on how realistic the threat is, coupled with the actual threat itself. So another straightforward way that assault is sometimes defined is an attempted battery. And indeed, generally the main distinction between an assault and a battery is that no contact is necessary for an assault, whereas an offensive or illegal contact must occur for the battery. So the man who chases someone with a sword, okay, that would be an assault. And unless he hits him with a sword, it remains an assault. But if he catches up and hits him with a sword or pokes him with a sword or otherwise makes contact after threatening him, then you're going to have the battery, okay? But most states, I think all, have outlawed assault on some level or another because they don't want people running around threatening each other. That's one of the things we'd like to do away with in our society. Now, while contact is not generally required for an assault offense, a conviction for assault still requires a criminal act. The types of acts that fall into the category of assaults can vary widely from state to state, but typically an assault requires an overt or direct act that would put the reasonable person in fear for their safety. Spoken words alone will not be enough of an act to constitute an assault unless the speaker backs them up with an act or actions that puts the victim in a reasonable fear of imminent harm. Okay? This right here could be perceived as a threat. And if I said, hey, I'm gonna get you, and I do that, okay? But mere words shouldn't do it. In order to commit an assault, an individual need only have general intent. What this means is that although someone can't accidentally assault another person, it is enough to show that an offender intended the actions which make up the assault. So if an individual acts in a way that's considered dangerous to other people, that can be enough to support assault charges, even if they didn't intend to harm a particular person. Moreover, an intent to scare or frighten another person can be enough to establish assault charges as well. So the defense, I was just trying to scare him. It's not a valid reason to assault somebody. Now, battery will vary definitionally by jurisdiction. A typical definition for battery is the intentional, offensive, or harmful touching of another person without their consent. Under this general definition, the battery will require intentional touching that is harmful or offensive without consent from the victim. Now, we discussed before that generally speaking, you can't consent to a battery. So you can't shoot somebody and go, cops show up and they go, yeah, he asked me to. Oh, okay. Because you can see why that'd be contrary to public policy. But there are all kinds of things that would be considered battery that with consent we wouldn't think are battery. So like for instance, if you are in a martial arts class and you are simply studying judo, okay? And, one of the things you do when practicing judo or a similar martial art is you might grab somebody by the collar of their uniform and fling them to the ground. And that would be a battery outside of the bounds of that school, generally speaking. So, battery generally does not require any intent to harm the victim, but a person need only have an intent to contact or cause contact with an individual. Additionally, if someone acts in a criminally reckless or negligent manner that results in such contact, it may constitute an assault. As a result, accidentally bumping into somebody would not constitute a battery. But you'd, again, have to be able to prove it was an accident and also prove that, get a jury to buy it. The criminal act required for battery boils down to an offensive or harmful contact. Can range from anywhere from the obvious battery where physical attack, such as a punch or a kick, is involved, or even minimal contact in some cases. Generally, a victim doesn't need to be injured or harmed for a battery to have occurred, so long as an offensive contact is involved. In a classic example, spitting on an individual doesn't physically injure them for the most part, but nonetheless can constitute offensive contact sufficient for a battery. Whether a particular contact is considered offensive is usually evaluated from the perspective of the ordinary or reasonable person. So again, think of it this way. Assault is where I attempt to or threaten to batter you, and battery is if I follow through. So assault and battery, okay? I try to hit you and I miss, that's an assault. I try to hit you and I do, that's a battery. Assault and battery. But again, it's going to vary by state, and the definitions will vary. What they call it will vary. But as of right now, there's a man in Manchester, New Hampshire, charged with criminal threatening. And I suspect that's a low level of assault. But like I said, every state's going to have different definitions and how that works in different states. But like I said, anytime you see the word sword in a story, pass it my way. I deserve it. Questions or comments? Put them below. Otherwise, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. It's kind of fun to do the impossible.